Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Dealing with family drama and financial shenanigans at 18? That's going to leave some scars. Today in the rLounge, this stepdad never expected his money laundering scheme to unravel faster than a cheap sweater in a washing machine. Shady stepdad tried to whisk away my inheritance. I brought him to streets. I'm new to this sub. I was searching for something and I landed up here. Reading so many similar stories, I want to give a shot at mine. So here we go. I recently turned 18, which I desperately wanted to, for the last few months. You see, my dad died when I was a little boy, 7 I think. I have a very faint memory of him. Then, a few years later, my mom got married to my stepdad. I don't know why, but I never felt comfortable around him. He gave me a very shady vibe. I always knew he was not the kind of man he had been portraying himself to be in front of my mom. I'm an introvert. More than talking, I like to observe people. That's how I concluded he was not the person he was playing. Initially, I tried to caution Mom about him, but she snapped my feeling and asked me to put an effort to build a relationship with my new family. She thought I was just jealous. I was, but my concerns were also valid. He had a daughter, Martha, who was of my age. We didn't get along well for obvious reasons. She was a dumb brat. She threw tantrums at us from the moment we came to her house. There was one more thing I hated about my mom's second wedding. It was we who had to make all the compromises. I mean, Mom and I had to move to his place because his princess didn't want to leave her house. I was transferred to her school because it would be easier for them to pick it up and drop both kids at once. You know what happens to a new kid in a school? On top of that, Martha would gang up with other bullies and pick up on me. I told her to Mom, but that didn't help. Mom dismissed it and said she would not interfere in the siblings' matters. Plus, I was bullied even more on the next day, but thankfully, it soon ended. I was good in math, which kinda saved my butt as I helped other kids during recess. Soon I made friends and it got better for me. However, having her in the house was still horrible. I used to get mad at Mom for overshowering her love on Martha. I hated it because Martha didn't reciprocate my mom's love, and on top of that, she would be mean to my mom. She would yell at her every now and then to not cross her boundaries. Eventually, I got distant from Mom, and she was more busy making relationships with her new husband and stepdaughter. During that phase, I got closer to my grandparents. They were quite well off. They had this big house with a pool and a huge garden. I used to spend most of my days off from school at my grandparents'. When Martha got to know about the pool, she tagged along with me. I hated it. I told my mom not to send Martha with me because we couldn't stand each other. She asked me to take this as a way of bonding with her. I said I didn't want to bond with her because she is a horrible person, but my mom would ask me to be a bigger person and initiate the goodness. I was just 4 months older than Martha, and yet my mom would ask me to compromise because apparently I was her big brother. I was too small to rebel, so most of the time I would have to suck it up. Martha was not attached to my grandparents. The only reason she wanted to go there was because of the pool. She was an evil kid and would always get away with her nuisance. Her dad pampered her to the core, and my mom chose to look the other way, but my grandparents were able to see through her cute dumbness. They would put her in her place if she ever crossed her line. To my grandparents, I was the only one who was truly their family. It was natural for them to be protective of me. You see, my dad was the only child of my grandparents, so they didn't have to invest a lot in raising children. They had invested in some good properties over the years, which compounded in their old age. They had an asset manager to handle everything because they were not capable of handling it on their own. My stepdad worked as an account manager in a private bank, so he had experience in handling some money matters. My mom recommended him to my grandparents. Initially, they refused, but eventually my stepdad was able to win their trust and my grandparents hired him to manage their assets. I was not happy with their decision to let stepdad manage their assets, but I was a young boy who would listen to me in money matters. He tried hard to impress my grandparents and put up a gentleman's mask. I was able to see through his acts. I just wanted to turn 18 so that I could live my life on my own. However, when I was 17, my mom went with my grandparents for a month-long trip. It was supposed to be a family trip, but unfortunately our high school test got postponed and we had to stay. Stepdad opted to stay and take care of us. I hated to have him in the house. He shows his true colors when Mom is not around. My test was over in a week. To avoid seeing him around, I took up a part-time job at a grocery store. I came home only at night. He tried to school me, asking where I was spending my days. He said he's my legal guardian, so he's entitled to watch over me. Legal guardian my butt. I said Mom is my legal guardian, and she knows where I'm spending my days, so I don't need to tell you. He didn't like my assertiveness. However, my arrogance was short-lived because a week later I got the news that my mom and my grandparents died in a car accident. I felt so horrible that I was unable to accept the truth. It took 2 days for their dead bodies to be shipped to our place. Every second of those days, I prayed they were different people and not them. They say denial is the first stage of grief. I was in denial that something this horrendous would happen to me. I was hoping that some miracle would happen and they would pop up and say that they were alive. I was in a different zone on those 2 days. I refused to accept that they were no more. My mother's side of the family came to support me, but I refused to accept anyone's condolences until I saw my family's lifeless bodies myself. I rushed to my room and locked up myself for days. I was angry at them for leaving me alone with this wicked man. I was angry at God, angry at my dad, angry at my mom, angry at my grandparents, as how could they? I just couldn't take that grief. My uncle helped me a lot in navigating through it. I was so grief-stricken that I couldn't speak a word at their funeral. Stepdad gave them an honorable farewell. The fact that all of them who I thought to be family left together, and the worst part of it was they left me to a man whom I hated the most. At the funeral, a lawyer approached me. I'd never met a lawyer before. My mom had no big assets. She did a normal job. She had a house that she had sold off before moving to Stepdad's place. There was insurance money and all, but I was not too hopeful about it because of her profound love for Stepdad and Martha. I was right. As per Mom's will, 75% of the assets, which were her insurance and money left in the bank account, would go to my stepdad, and I get 25% of it. However, the real show began when the lawyer read out my grandfather's will. As per that, 20% would go to charity and the remaining 80% would be divided between me and Mom. In case one of us died, their portion would go to the other one, and under unforeseen circumstances, if both of us died, the entire inheritance would go to the charity. In this case, my mother's portion would be inherited by me, which made me the owner of 80% of the wealth. However, there was a clause that dictated I'd be able to have possession of the assets only after I turned 18. Until then, the asset would be controlled by my legal guardian, which was my mom. Now that my mother was not there, my legal guardian would ultimately be my stepdad, whether I like it or not. The responsibility of taking care of my grandparents' wealth took over my grief to an extent. On top of that, I had to deal with the greediness of my stepdad. So sorrow kind of took a back seat. Not to mention that my stepdad was not happy to see me becoming a millionaire overnight. His behavior towards me completely changed. He acted as the most caring person in the world, the same act which he used to put in front of my mother and grandparents. In the initial days, I used to be put up in my room. He would bring me food and soup and would knock my door often to check on me. I was suspicious of his motive, but instead of confronting him directly, I waited for him to make the move. I knew he couldn't put up with this act for a long time. Just a week after the funeral, he brings up the inheritance talks. He goes, "As you know, I used to handle your grandparents' assets. Sadly, they are no more. In order to continue my work, I would need you to sign those papers for approval." It was too overwhelming for me. I was scared that he would exploit my vulnerability. I had watched and read too much fiction where the main character loses everything by signing some unverified documents. So I asked him if this document would be to rehire him as the asset manager. He was taken aback by my question. Maybe he didn't see that coming. He said, "Partly, yes." I was like, "What's the whole thing?" He said I was too young to understand this. I insisted he made me understand, or else I wouldn't sign anything. He said these things were too complicated for a 17-year-old, but he would try the layman's explanation for my understanding. He said in the absence of my mom, he is my uncontested legal guardian. Fair enough. So I should hand over the inheritance to him. Since he is experienced in money matters, he would not only keep it secure, but also grow it for me. I clarified, "You want me to give you access to manage my money, right?" He replied, well, slightly different. To ease up the complexities, I would want you to transfer them in my name." I lost my mind. He had been hiding his greed under the wordy jargon, but when I broke it down for him, he had no other way to admit his true intentions. I made it more evident to him that I understood everything. I asked, "So you want to own my grandparents' wealth, don't you?" He understood he was caught off guard. "It's for your own good. I'll help it grow." I was like, "You could do it by being my manager. Why do you have to be an owner?" He said, "You're teenage. You are raging with hormones. Money is known to bring the worst out of a person. What if you give it into the wrong company and empty your family's wealth? So it's better if I safeguard it for you." I rolled my eyes and he said, "You know how women hunt for men with money. What if a girl traps you into marriage and then divorces you and takes away all your wealth for alimony? You're too naive for the cruel world out there." I took out my phone and searched for the law around prenup. He didn't realize I was able to see through his BS. He goes, "If you think you'll be able to dodge all these bullets, Think about your relatives and friends who would try to manipulate you and exploit you for the money. I snapped at him. Glad you brought this up. If anyone who is manipulating me now, it's you. I'm not a fool to fall for your pretentious mask. You think me to be a dummy like your bimbo daughter, but mind you, I am not. I may be 17 and may not have experience in money matters, but I have the intelligence to differentiate between reality and a facade, so back off. You're not getting anything from here. He went away that day, but tried to convince me again, but I put my foot down and said a big no. I'm not going to transfer any bit of the inheritance to him. Eventually, he returned bitter towards me. He started counting the favors he had done for me. He said he gave me food and shelter, married my mom, gave me his name, and loved me like his son. I said, cut the crap. Still no from me. Slowly, manipulation took the form of arguments, and soon it got violent where both of us yelled at each other. One morning it got so severe that he pushed me out of the house and locked me out. I saw terror in his eyes that day. I felt I was an inch closer to being physically harmed. I told my friend about this and he cautioned me. Though my stepdad is not gaining anything from my death, everything could go to charity, but what if he pulls off a foul play for the inheritance? Money is capable of bringing out the worst in people. The next day, when he was not at home, I came back, packed my stuff, and left. I had given my gadgets to my friend in exchange for letting me live with him for 4 months. Meanwhile, I told my stepdad that I was living with my maternal uncle in case he reported me missing. He texted me to be careful and not get manipulated and give away my wealth. However, on my 18th birthday, my maternal uncle did reach out to me asking about my well-being, but he didn't say anything about money. Then I visited my grandfather's lawyer who initiated the transfer of assets in my name. He asked me to make a will to safeguard my interest. I have done that. The thing is, now that I legally own everything and my stepdad hopefully cannot pull tricks, would it be wise to hire him as the asset manager? I have a very limited understanding of all this. Besides, I'm prepping for my undergrad admission. I need someone to take care of my wealth. So instead of hiring someone unknown, do I bet on my stepdad? Welcome to the sub. Quite the initiation story you've got here. Your stepdad seems to have a knack for making himself comfortable in other people's pockets, doesn't he? But hey, at least he's consistent in his greed, right? It's like a game of chess where you're trying to outmaneuver the guy who's been playing dirty since the opening move. Kudos to you for not falling for his sweet talk wrapped in layers of manipulation. But now that you've got the keys to the kingdom, the big question is, do you trust him to guard the treasure? It's like asking a fox to watch over the hen house. Sure, he might promise to keep it safe, but deep down, you know he's eyeing those golden eggs. Honestly, it's a tough call. On one hand, hiring a stranger to manage your wealth feels like playing Russian roulette with your financial future. On the other hand, trusting your stepdad is like playing a game of chicken with a bulldozer. Either way, there's a good chance someone's getting flattened. Update 1. Sorry for not updating this sooner. Been too busy juggling a lot of responsibilities. As I mentioned, I was living with my friend until I turned 18, and the asset was transferred to my name. My lawyer recommended an asset manager for me. I moved to my grandparents' house for a while, but the house was too big for me. So I rented it out and I moved to a secured apartment. My stepdad was furious when I told him that I was firing him. He had been managing it until then. He tried manipulating me that the lawyer had a secret motive behind this recommendation. I still followed my instincts and hired a professional. Then I got to know why my stepdad was pushing so hard to not hire someone else. My account manager reported discrepancies in accounting. He hinted at the possibility of money laundering. When stepdad realized he would be uncovered, he filed a case to overturn the will to divert the attention. His case had no merit. He knew he would not win, but it was done only to divert my attention from the money laundering case. However, I didn't lose my composure and sued him for fraud. A natural and thorough investigation was ordered. Stepdad's laptop and tabs were seized. His bank account was frozen and he was ordered to not leave the city until the investigation was over. It came out that stepdad had been embezzling funds from my grandparents' property. He lost both of his lawsuits. His plea for overturning the will was thrown away on the first day of the hearing. For the money laundering suit filed by me, he tried his best to defend himself, but he could not. His shady activities were not new. He had been doing this ever since my grandparents hired him. After their death, he thought he got a free hand and whisked about $150,000 in total through all assets. However, when he realized that I was not easy to manipulate, he tried to cover it up and put back some money to fill the holes, but it was a huge gap to cover up. The court ordered him to pay all the money he had siphoned. He was heavily fined to trade off his prison time. Not only this, he was asked to pay me the court case charges. Whatever he received from Mom's will was gone in paying the fine and compensation. In the end, he was barely left with anything but a knee-deep debt. He ultimately had to sell his house to pay for the $150,000 money he had embezzled from my grandparents' property. I made everything sound so easy, but trust me, it was not. When I pressed him with the money laundering case, I had to face a lot of brunt from him. He tried all the tricks to back me, from manipulating me into thinking I wasn't capable enough to handle everything alone, and that I needed a guardian over me, to guilt-tripping me that my mom would have been so hurt to know I had sued her husband. He did it all. He was dang good at it. At one point, I actually started questioning myself whether I really would be able to handle everything alone, or do I need an arsenal with me? If none of these tricks worked, he tried to threaten me. For many days, I felt someone was following me. I got threatening notes pasted on my car window. I couldn't do anything because there was no evidence that it was him. When I confronted him, he gave an evil laugh and said maybe I should be alert. It's not new that people get killed for money. That was when I left my grandparents' house and shifted to an apartment. I felt unsafe in a big house. Apartment seemed a lot safer. Not only him, but his loser daughter also came behind me. She was not as smart as her dad, who did not leave a footprint of his threats. The dumb girl came directly to my door. She screamed at me for bringing them to the streets. I said, "Now you would understand how one feels to leave their house. Remember how you used to mock me as a kid when I cried because Mom sold our house? Karma's a witch, you know." She called me names and I gave it back to her. She got so furious that she tried to punch me in the face. I dodged it and unleashed my dog on her. She left with bruises and wounds from the encounter with my dog. Dogs are dang faithful. However, after the court case gave the judgment in my favor, my lawyer asked me to get a restraining order against them with reference to the incidents happening to me, threat messages, etc. I managed to get a temporary restraining order for 6 months because they don't have a criminal history, and there was no evidence except for Martha banging at my door. It's almost 4 months since all this ended. I have enrolled in an undergrad school, and by the way, I'm pursuing law. I feel like I would need to know the law of the land to handle the wealth, so what better than saving the attorney's charges? I'm also planning to take a crash course on investing in finance so that I understand what my account manager is up to. Now, I don't have any other option than to trust him blindly. In a nutshell, life got better. Thank you guys for all the empathy and love. Looks like your stepdad fancied himself a real-life Walter White, huh? And Martha? Oh, Martha. Trying to throw fists and failing miserably. Classic. Looks like her bark is worse than her bite. Or should I say her bark is worse than your dog's bite? But hey, kudos to you for not crumbling under the pressure, OP. Taking on a legal battle while dodging threats and dealing with family drama, you're practically a one-person crime-fighting squad. Move over, Batman. We've got a new hero in town. And now you're off to pursue law? Talk about turning lemons into lemonade. With your newfound legal prowess, you'll be able to outwit any shady characters who dares cross your path. Who needs a guardian angel when you've got a law degree, am I right? Bring it on, world. Has a family member ever tried to scam you out of money? What did you do? And thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon. And don't forget to push your chair back where you found it.